Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the NBA Front Office Show. We've got some cap-related news to get into today. We've got some buyout talks, all kinds of stuff to talk about on today's show. If you're not doing so already, please make sure you do subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us over on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts. I'm Trevor Lane. You can find me over on X at Trevor_Lane, joined by Keith Smith at Keith Smith NBA. Keith, we've got some very cap nerdy stuff to get into today, which is always exciting.
Yeah, we absolutely do. Hey, I want to say one thing. I was looking at the Apple reviews. Two people who wrote very kind reviews only gave us 1-star ratings. So I'm assuming that was a mistake, or the kind review was maybe fully sarcasm. But if you gave a rating recently, and these were within like the last month, if you want to go back in and look and just make sure you actually tagged it, 5 is best, not 1.
It's a scale of 1 to 5, 5 being preferred.
Yes, correct. So, I mean, hey, if your real feeling was a 1, but it was accompanied by very kind written reviews. So I just wanted to throw that out there. But yeah, we've got some cap stuff going on. I think the league generally, what happens is the NBA a week or so out from the trade deadline will try to release a cap projection for the next season, because often, as we know, some teams are making trades for next year, right?
Sure.
They're making trades with next season in mind. So the NBA officially released its new memo that went out, its new cap memo to teams. And what they told teams was the original cap projection was 142 million. It is now down to 141 million. So it went down by 1 million. So then everything else adjusts off that. We don't need to get into every other number out there with the apron and the max salaries.
I'll put them up on the screen here.
Stuff, but they have all adjusted down now. So we're in a spot where it is slightly different. With these perfect, you got that up there. So that's where it is. The memo did not specify that the tax, the apron, and the second apron were changing. They will change. Like, I think this is just some rounding from the league. This isn't even rounding from Woj. Woj, I think, is just saying, here's what it was in the new cap memo. But here we are. So down a little bit. Why it's down, I think the single biggest reason is the regional TV stuff. That still is floating out there as a kind of an unknown. My guess is the league is projecting it's not going to deliver the way it was supposed to the teams, that's all money that goes in the pot, which figures out the overall salary cap as a part of the BRI calculation. BRI is basketball related income. And my guess is that's what happened. It's not all coming in the way they thought. So here we are where the cap's a little bit lower than projected.
Now, Keith, to make sure we're clear on this does not mean the cap is going down. This just means it's not going up by quite as much as they projected it to. It is still good. The cap is still increasing. Now, you can have a maximum increase of 10%. We're not going to be anywhere near that. In fact, I think the figure I saw was like 3%, 3.7%.
Yeah, this new one is 3.7. The old one was 4.4% for this year to next year. You're absolutely right. It's a max of 10%, and it can't go down. So this year's salary cap is 100. It's roughly 136 million. It's just slightly over that. It can't go under that number. It would be 136 million at least next year. This is still 141 million, about 5 million more, and that's about a 3.7% increase versus the 4.4 that was off the last official memo. And there's still some people running around using the full 10%. Which we've cautioned against because that seems extremely unlikely. And I think this only furthers how unlikely that is, that we see it go up 10%.
So functionally, what's the effect of this on teams?
Yeah, the guys who have inked max salaries already, they'll come in a little bit lower. Like the rookie scale max guys, so Anthony Edwards, Tyrese Halliburton, all those guys who have max extensions kicking in next year, or the so-called super max extensions. So like Jaylen Brown and Karl Anthony Towns, like their numbers will come in a little lower. If it comes in lower, then even if it goes up 10% from 24-25 to 25-26, those numbers will also be lower because now you're starting off a lower base. number. So everything just comes in slightly lower. Anybody who thought, oh man, we've got, this much to work with in cap space, it's now just a little bit lower. This is only $1 million. This isn't all that drastic. It matters, but it's not a something where it's like, oh my gosh, like this will never work. For example, the 35% max was projected at 49.7 million. Now it's 49.35 million. So it's 350,000 less. So it's not even all that crazy there. So just a little bit less that it's gonna look like.
All right. So something else that we need to get into, which it seems ridiculous on the surface when you see this, but Bobby Marks put this out. 11 teams control 75% of the tradable first round picks. That's and I think of those 11 teams, 95% of that is OKC. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah,
no, I'm making that up. I'm making that up. But I think this does speak to something for the trade market that you have to consider. What this tells you is that the teams who have tradable first round picks, who feel like they're in a position to give away first round picks in order to try to, I mean, you would assume if they're trading a first round pick, they're trying to win now. The fact that 75% of the first round picks are in the hands of 11 teams, that tells you that a lot of those teams have made their moves already, which obviously this can shift as some of the teams that own the picks improve, right? Like when we think about the Thunder, they've got a bunch of picks. They're not going to be in a mode anymore where they're going to be selling off assets to get more picks. They're more likely to flip and become a buyer now. So obviously that can shift the dynamic quite a bit, but I think it also suggests that maybe there won't be quite as many picks as there were, say, a few years ago that are available for trade, because again, a lot of those teams that are in that upper echelon right now, they've already made their moves. They've used those picks, and you can't trade them again once you've already traded them. So that's something to keep an eye on here on the trade market that may cause the value of first round picks to fluctuate a little bit compared to previous years.
Yeah, and I think there is something to be said too. We're probably, if we're not there, we're really approaching a breaking point of teams acquiring picks, because I think like you hit a point where how many are too many, right? Do you need all those picks? And it's all the teams you would think of. It's the Thunder, the Pelicans, the Jazz now. I think Orlando's got some extra ones. Houston's got some extra picks. Brooklyn now does with that. But in order for them to have all those picks, there need to be teams, obviously, that are out. So teams like Minnesota, Cleveland, Phoenix, especially, like those teams don't have picks. So yeah, it's just one of those things where, it kind of tells you, all right, if we need to do trades that involve draft picks, it's probably going to come from one of those teams. Now, a team like the Thunder that's really good, they're in a spot where, yeah, they could probably say, okay, you want 5 picks? Great, let's go. Like if that's what you really need, we can deliver that to you. And we talk about this all the time. Sometimes all teams want to be able to do is report, we got 5 first round picks for player X, even though it's really 2 and 3 of them are tied up with projections and maybe won't even convey. And if they convey, they're going to be the 25th pick in the draft or something like that. So, but that's the way that stuff kind of goes. So I think we're in a spot where, we're in a very interesting place with just the way draft picks are spread out. And I thought there was a really cool tweet from Bobby where it was like, hey, let me really lay this out for you of like where, this is at. Cause I think sometimes we kind of know these things, but when you see numbers like that, it's like, holy crap, a third of the league controls 75% of the draft picks. Like, wow, that is just bonkers stuff.
It's the kind of thing that's startling where you think, man, I can't believe it's really that drastic, but it is. And I think you're right that you do hit a point of oversaturation with picks where you can't possibly use all of those picks as well. So it'll be interesting to see how all of this plays out on the market and what this means for teams. But there's that we've hit the point now where you don't have quite as many teams that are kind of in that middle ground. You have the teams that are either going for it, or you have the teams that are, saying, okay, well, let's get some picks and see what we can do for the future. And you've got a lot of teams who went all out on getting draft picks, and sometimes it can pay off, sometimes it doesn't. So certainly a startling number, though, that I think illustrates a lot of the context around the trade market right now. Speaking of the trade market, Death of a dynasty. The Warriors open to
You will
trading Chris
Wiggins.
Paul. Wigging. Andrew
I love
Wigging.
it.
Well, the way he's playing, he is wigging out right now, I think, a little bit.
Point. Oh,
I will fix that out of respect to Andrew Wiggins, the typo. And Klay Thompson could potentially even be available. And obviously, Chris Paul, there's not as much of an attachment to him, but Andrew Wiggins, I mean, he was great for them. They won the championship.
They don't win the title without him.
Yeah, he was fantastic. And then Klay, of course. I mean, is Klay getting a statue out front, you think?
It's a good question. Yeah.
Like Steph is.
Don't you probably just do one with Steph, Draymond, Klay, and Kerr, like all together?
That makes sense.
Like, yeah,
that would make sense.
Yeah, maybe you do one where like they're all standing around, like listening to him or watching him drop a play or something like that. That would make sense. Or I don't know. Maybe I'd have to go back. I know there's famous pictures of Steph, Draymond, and Klay together, like after titles, like all standing together. Maybe you can just kind of slide Kerr in beside them and do that. That's what I would do.
Yeah, I like that. But regardless, there's obviously much more attachment to Klay Thompson. So I think it would be more difficult for them to move Klay, although Klay does have that big expiring contract. They got to figure out what they're going to do with him and if they're going to come to terms on a new deal. But it really does feel like this is probably it for the Warriors with where they're sitting in the Western Conference right now. They either need to make some moves to try to help Steph or make some tough decisions this summer. But I think we could be, a week and a half away from a drastically different Golden State Warriors team.
Yeah, I think so. I think we're at a point where I think the Warriors have maybe said, all right, we're not all about chasing upgrades for the rest of this year. I think they've we're not moving Kuminga. We're not moving Brandon Podziemski. Those would be two huge players to throw into any trade offers if they're trying to upgrade. And I think the Warriors are like, hey, if we turn it around, fine. But if we can get off Wiggins' money long term, maybe get ourselves out from underneath the apron, like just get so we're in a good place now where we're a little bit freed up to do some stuff salary wise. I think you could see that be a real goal of theirs here over the next week or so leading up to the deadline where it's if we turn it around and we make the play-in tournament, fine, and clearly they have Steph. So any single elimination, like I'd love to have Steph Curry, right? Like that's great. So maybe you can win through the play-in tournament and get into the playoffs. But otherwise, let's not go all in on trying to chase guys to like for example, why would we trade a bunch of stuff to go get Zach LaVine when that's not a guarantee that that's going to lift us into even the playoffs? Never mind title contention, right? So I think we could see, though, CP3, that was always designed to be a short-term thing anyway. And then Wiggins, the Klay one that would surprise me quite a bit. But all I will say is anytime they come up, whether it's Woj or Shams or anybody else, Chris Haynes, anybody else, there's always kind of a piece of that gets thrown in there like, maybe they could listen on Klay Thompson. So it's not as much where it's like, it's been made very clear they have no interest in listening to even offers for Steph. But Klay feels like, all right, if you want to pull us over with an offer, like we're willing to listen. Now, I also wonder if there's all right, we'll trade him to you for the rest of the year. Then we'll just re-sign him next summer anyway and bring him back. Now, that'd be obviously very hard for them to do.
Yeah, I was going to say, that would be tough for them to have the cap to do it unless we want to talk mid-level exception. But
exactly. Yeah. And I tend to think it's more likely what we're going to see is Klay sticks. Then next year we see him sign like a 1+1 kind of deal for $20 million a season, and that's where it goes. I think that's more like what we see happen.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Draymond would be kind of tough to move at this point, just given all of the Draymond stuff. But Chris Paul is a guy to keep an eye on. Certainly a player they could move, but again, it comes down to, do they really want to make the all-in move this season? Is it worth it? And that's the problem for them.
Yeah, without a doubt. Sorry, I was typing a message to somebody.
No worries.
This whole cap thing's got people in such a tizzy, and it's like,
really,
breathe. It's $1 million. Like,
I didn't think it was all that significant. And maybe it's just something coming in lower than expected. What's that?
And that's me saying it. Like,
right.
for everybody to settle down. But it's just, it's some of it is people which I very much appreciate. A lot of people have built their own cap sheets and the like, and they're like, I'm just trying to make sure my sheet's accurate for next year. And it's like, okay, fair, like good question.
Mm-hmm.
So.
All right, let's jump over to the Cavs, who picked up a big win over the Clippers last night. Evan Mobley back in action, and then Darius Garland is on his way back as well. This Cavs team, along with the Knicks, two teams in the East that would like to break into that top tier. I definitely don't have them in the top tier right now. Speaking of which, this is an aside, but I was asked this on the radio yesterday. How do you have it in the East? Do you have it the Celtics and then the Bucks and the Sixers in their own tier, like the Celtics are in a different tier? And then how big of a gap is that? Or is it a 3-team tier at the top with Celtics, Bucks, and Sixers?
Yeah, it was I still have it Celtics, Bucks, then Sixers. Like, I think Celtics, Bucks are on pretty even playing ground. I would have Boston. People now will call me a homer. I do have Boston slightly ahead of Milwaukee. I mean, They're 4 games up right now.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
They're, so I think they are slightly ahead. And we've seen when they have their full starting 5 available, they're dominant. They're almost impossible to beat. Like, they're that good. Now, Philly, I have just these constant worries that Embiid's going to be there when it really matters. Mm-hmm. So I'm worried about that. And let's see. I want to see them make some kind of move to put themselves in a better place than being, slightly behind the rest.
Yeah, so that'll be something to keep an eye. I mean, we've heard them in a lot of trade rumors. The question is, what do they actually do out there on the market here? And if they can get a piece that's going to really help them, because I agree, Embiid, he's got a super high usage rate. Can that continue all season long? Obviously, the games are already being missed, and that was weird. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the NBA is looking into Embiid getting pulled so soon from tip-off of that game against the Nuggets, which was certainly a big letdown.
Yeah, that's what was said, was because he wasn't on the injury report at all. And then he was then he was basically like ruled out right before when they watched him warm up. And there is a question of like, hey, what's going on? Now, he's since missed last night's game, which was another loss for Philadelphia, which is like they've lost a little bit of ground here. They've lost 3 in a row. They're not tied with the Knicks as far as being games back. They're slightly ahead percentage-wise. Cavs are only a half game behind them there. So as Cavs and Knicks, just they're rolling. They're both just keep winning games. So yeah, I'm gonna guess the NBA says, hey, God, sometimes that happens. I don't think there was anything nefarious with Embiid. And he did get hurt the game before, because the whole thing the game before was he was limping around and then he went back in. It seemed very clearly to try to extend the 30-point streak. And there were I know a lot of Philly fans are like, what are we doing? Like, who cares about this thing? This stupid streak that really ultimately at the end of the day doesn't hold a lot of meaning. So yeah, I'm not sure, what comes of that. With Darius Garland back, I think it was yesterday's show, I said, I wonder if part of what it is like he's got to get his weight up. Shams did say that. He's like, he's been recovering. He's getting his weight up after having his jaw wired shut. I can only imagine he's lost some weight, which has me thinking maybe that's a diet I need to work on here. Maybe that's my next step to blast through this little plateau I'm sitting on. Just wire my jaw shut.
You're gonna wire your jaw shut?
Yeah, right.
That's a little extreme.
Hey, if it works, baby. Summer's coming, Trevor. I gotta look good for summer league.
That's right. We're gonna be in Vegas. We're gonna be out by the pool.
That's it. We'll be out by the pool in my Speedo, and no one's gonna want to see it if I don't get my beach body ready.
We just went. We always tell people like, hey, if you see us at Summer League, come up, say hi. Now nobody's gonna come up to us now.
Perfect. I'll be left alone. Me and my cap sheets by the pool. Yeah, it's what's funny is the idea that I even leave the room when we're not actively at games or doing something. That's the funnier part. I pretty much hole up in my hotel room and work on cap sheets the entirety of Summer League. So you're probably not going to see me anywhere else anyway. But
that is the Summer League experience. Speaking of things that we talked about yesterday that came true, Taj Gibson back with the Knicks.
So funny. So funny. 10-day contract. It was 10-day contract day, apparently, in the NBA
Yeah, here, let's
today.
get to
We'll
that.
get into the others because they were all signed by Memphis. But yeah, Taj Gibson back. They need just another body in there. I don't know that that's really the answer, but we'll see. I'm very curious now to see if if we get a little bit more serious. Has it changed their trade plans at all? Like,
Hmm.
are they looking for something maybe a little different? We've been hearing a ball handler that can replace what Emmanuel quickly gave them. Do they say, we kind of got enough guards, we'll make it work? We need to get another big in because it sounds like it's something minor, but OG Anunoby missed last night's game with elbow inflammation, right elbow
Hmm.
inflammation, too. So they were down Randall and Anunoby last night. I don't know how much you can get by with Isaiah Hartenstein and four smalls around him all the
Yeah.
time. So you just wonder, did this change things up a little bit for the Knicks?
Yeah, that's something that we'll have to see if if this changes things. We talked about potential trade candidates and things like guys they can go after that would give them a little bit of size, with Randall being out. So, which I mean, the Knicks are right there. Doesn't feel like
Yeah.
they're that far off from
No.
making a real run. I think they're another team that I would actually be surprised if the trade deadline passed. And part of that, of course, is the Fournier contract. But if the trade deadline passed and they didn't do anything, I would be surprised.
Yeah, I do wonder if they're thinking bigger. Like we got we the Fournier deal. Once that's gone, you've kind of fired your last big chip out there
Hmm.
to make something happen. So I do wonder if they're like, we got one more bigger move we can make still, and if they don't feel like the right one is there at the trade deadline, maybe they hold. But yeah, I would like to see them do something to fortify this team because you're right, they are right there. Like there's, and I say this all the time. No, we just talked about it. I don't have them in the same tier as like Boston and Milwaukee, not even Philadelphia, even though they're closer to Philly now than ever.
Hmm.
But all it takes is Embiid is hurt, Porzingis is hurt, uh, Giannis has back issues again like last year, and now all of a sudden you're through, and
Yeah.
you're playing for in a finals you didn't expect to be in. So that's why I think teams like Cleveland, New York, Indiana, like you kind of owe it to yourselves, like yeah, kind of go not to go super all in, but do something just to be in just in that much better of a place where hey, why not us, right? If something goes kind of sideways, why not us?
Okay, so you said maybe they could hold their chips for for next season or whatever, or making a big move over the summer. That they're waiting for the big move, and right now, um, oh, there's Chris Haynes, Tyrese Maxey misses third straight game tonight against the Warriors. He's got an
Yeah,
ankle sprain,
Philly's
so
going
that
through
a
it right
little bit
now.
more news.
I
Yeah,
think
Philly.
Embiid's already out too, maybe.
Uh,
I don't know. I haven't
I'd have to
seen the
look.
injury report yet.
Yeah, but that's not good for the
No.
76ers. Not good.
Yep.
But anyway, back to what I was saying. Um, if they're holding out for the big move, and I think our general sense has been that the big fish is not out there on the market right now at the trade deadline. Now we never know what could happen. It could be surprise. Kevin Durant gets traded at 2:30 in the morning. I mean, you never know with this league. But right now, it seems like the biggest name on the market is DeJounte Murray. And the report from yesterday, Quinn Snyder actually doesn't want him traded, and we don't know if he's actually even going to get moved. So, are you suggesting that the Knicks, Evan Fournier has a team option for 19 million for next season? We've been looking at that contract as essentially an expiring because who's going to want to pay Evan Fournier 19 million dollars for next season? Do you think the Knicks could actually pick up that team option and just have a 19 million dollar expiring trade chip on their roster again next season?
Yep. I think for 29 teams, that's an expiring contract right now. For the Knicks, it is not. You
Hmm.
extend that window because declining it doesn't put you in place to have cap space. So why? Right? Unless there's something going on that we don't know about where they're gonna have to do something big that hasn't presented itself as evident. I would just pick it up and roll it into next year and figure it out, right? Because then what you've done is you've taken your window from the next 10 days till the trade deadline, 9 days till the trade deadline, whatever we're sitting on now, to a year. You have a whole year where you can figure something out with that, either this summer or you can figure it out at the next trade deadline if you need to. So, yeah, I think 100%. Now, I kind of don't want it to play out that way because I feel like Kevin Fournier can still probably play and offer a
Yeah.
team something. It is never going to happen in New York. So I'd rather see him go somewhere else where he can play in the immediate, or they decline the option. Maybe even they work a buyout with him and he goes and lands somewhere and then kind of go somewhere else. But yeah, I think there's a chance the Knicks pick that up. I don't think we should be operating under they will definitely decline that and move on.
Nope.
Just to close the loop, Woj reported
Yep.
Embiid will be questionable and will work out tonight before the game. So
Okay.
so we'll see what that looks like. The other 10 days that were signed, all by the Memphis Grizzlies. The Grizzlies have 3 hardship exceptions that they filled. They filled one yesterday. They filled
Unreal.
2 today. The one yesterday was filled by Matthew Hurt. Signed yesterday, jumped right in the rotation, played like 25 minutes. Actually had a pretty good game for Memphis, who put up a pretty good fight yesterday against the Kings. The other 2 guys, Trey Jemison, who just finished a 10-day with the Wizards. He's probably more of a center than a forward, but big kid, super athletic, guy around the rim, can make a lot of plays. I really like Trey Jemison. And then the other guy that they signed is Tassan Awoman. If that name sounds familiar to anybody, he kind of burst on the scene last year. Played at Princeton, which is not really known as a basketball factory for cranking out NBA players. A lot of NCAA history there with him, but he was a guy who kind of came on the scene and thought about maybe would be drafted. Went to camp with the Pistons. He's been playing for the Motor City Cruise. Good G League numbers, about 15 points per game in the G League, 8 assists, 4 rebounds. He's an okay defender. He's a gut forward-ish sized guy. So the Grizzlies, I think what they're doing right now is you make make lemonade out of lemons, right? Season has gone poorly. We have open roster spots. We're going to cycle through some guys, see if somebody pops like Vince Williams Jr. did.
Yep.
If they
He's
do,
been good.
let's go. And maybe we can find a way to keep them long term. But for now, it's just keep trying out a few guys.
Yeah, I did radio in Memphis yesterday, and we talked about that with Vince Williams. I mean, that's exactly what you need to do. You try to unearth diamonds in the rough, and if you find somebody great, and the Grizzlies certainly can bounce right back next season if they can
Grizzlies are
make
going to
the
be
right move.
right back in
They are. I think so.
next year. Because there's nothing. They're not going to do anything silly like, all right, well, this season has sucked. Let's trade Desmond Bane. Like they're just going to come back with everybody, and then all of a sudden it's like, man, Memphis is actually pretty good, huh?
Plus a high pick.
And then we go, yeah. Plus a high pick that they can either use themselves or use in a trade or whatever. They've got other tradable guys that they can move on from, which is more probably at the point where we got to consider that by the trade deadline.
Mm-hmm.
What are we going to do? Because this is a team. I think there's a chance maybe Luke Kennard gets moved because he's a guy, pretty decent contract. Teams are always looking for another shooter that can come off the bench. And for Memphis, that clears a big-ish salary off the books because right now they're looking at being a tax team next year. That's probably not really where they want to be. So I think we could see that freeze up a roster spot and just kind of keep rolling things over a little bit there on the bench.
All right, let's jump over to Gordon Hayward. A buyout for him appears to be unlikely. I know we talked about that yesterday as well. Some reasons why that may be the case, particularly if he's looking at the market for this coming summer. His best bet to getting a bigger contract may be just to stick with the Hornets and use bird rights to re-sign him. What's the Hornets' appetite to hang on to Hayward, especially at, I mean, obviously not the number he's at right now, but even at a above mid-level exception number?
I think their appetite's pretty low, but I think a sign and trade could certainly be possible where it is teams like, hey, all we could offer outright is the 12 million non-taxpayer, but maybe it is, hey, but we're happy to do 15 to 20 million in a sign and trade. And Charlotte may say, okay, send us a young player, a salary maybe you don't love, and then a draft pick or something like that, and we can make this happen. And kind of almost a reverse of what happened when they got him from Boston, where Boston paid them to make it a sign and trade so they could generate that massive trade exception, which they later used to become Evan Fournier. I think we could see something like that where for Hayward, it's like, yeah, I don't want to give this up because otherwise I'm probably topped out at the mid-level exception. So even if Charlotte doesn't want him, it's a similar story with Miles Bridges, right? Where it is Miles Bridges may block a trade just to say, nah, because if I go somewhere else, they can only pay me a slight bump over the amount I made. It's like 1.2 million, 1.3 million bump over what I made. already. So that's not enough for me. Like that, he's not going to want that. So I think for him, it's he may also say, "No, let's go a different direction." So I think interesting week here for the Hornets ahead for sure.
Yeah.
And again, I said this yesterday, but it's worth repeating. I think Hayward's in a different spot from Kyle Lowry. Kyle Lowry is in the. I've only probably got a couple years left. Probably looking at being a minimum player, maybe $5 million as part of an exception from somebody the next couple years anyway. So a buyout for him makes a lot more sense. Where for Hayward, it probably just doesn't make as much sense.
Last thing that we've got for today, some sad news here. Dave King from Bright Side of the Sun passes away. Keith, I'm familiar with his work. I've seen some of the things that he's done, but I know you've actually been on his show, so I'll let you speak a little bit more about him. But obviously, this is sad news from the sports media world that we're all. It seems like it's a big world, but it's also a very, very small one. We're all very interconnected. So this is it's something that's obviously going to hit all of us.
Yeah, when I worked for Celtics blog, which is part of SB Nation, that's how I came to know Dave a little bit because he was working for Bright Side of the Sun, which is also part of SB Nation. And Dave would hit me up with salary cap questions and the like. And we got, to form a pretty good professional relationship. We did a lot of times the SB Nation sites will go back and forth and we'll do some team stuff. When the Celtics would play the Suns, it might be, hey, what are you looking for in this game? And those kind of things. And then I did his show. It had a couple different names, but I know I did it when it was the Sun Solar Panel, they called it.
Mm-hmm.
And I did the show with him several times talking about salary cap stuff. One of the funniest things that ever happened was I did a show with them one weekend where I'm like, I just don't see a way they can get to a Chris Paul trade that makes sense. And literally later that week, they traded for Chris Paul. So I went back on the next weekend and we talked about how they got Chris Paul and like how it was kind of a fun, unique trade. And we had a blast with it. And it was just such a lighthearted guy where he's like, hey, man, you got to come back on. Just now it's like after we spent an hour saying why it wasn't going to happen, it happened. And let's go through it. So we had a great time. He had brain cancer. There's a very nice tribute to him up on the thing. But it seems like this all came together fairly quickly. I had noticed he had cut back on his work, but you never know with that stuff, is it?
Right.
What's going on in life and that. I know he had a wife and I think 3 daughters. Because I remember we talked about our kids some. So just it's just a tough loss. And I'll say this too. His legacy, what's going to be remembered, which is really cool. He started something called Bright Side Night, which was they would raise money from Suns fans and others. I chipped in over the years where they would buy 2,000 tickets to a Phoenix Suns game and send underprivileged youths that would never be able to go otherwise. And one of their kind of key requirements was they wanted kids who have never been to an NBA game before. Because one of Dave's big hopes was he always talked about how his first game like made him fall in love. And he always wanted to have some other kid fall in love. Well, this thing got so big that the Suns' new owners, Matt Ishbia and his brother, said, you do your night, we'll do another night and we'll match it. We'll do 2,000 tickets that we'll do. Same thing. So now they do that there in Phoenix. And that's just such a cool thing, man. Like it's like that'll hopefully be around forever. Right. And that just, that was all Dave and the effort he put in. He's just one of those guys, just a good guy. Like even when you disagreed with him about basketball stuff, you found it like, all right, we're just disagreeing about that. I'm not going to get worked up over it or anything. He was a passionate Suns fan, even when the team was god awful and they were dealing with the worst owner in the league at the time. Like he just kept his enthusiasm for the team. And like you said, that Bright Side Night, like just such a cool project. And, just so much, respect and love to him and all the best to his family during this difficult time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, again, sad news, unfortunately, but like you said, a legacy that will certainly live on with the event that he did and all of that.
Yeah, left the world a better place. That's
for sure.
At the end of the day, that's really, I think, all any of us can ask to do.
Absolutely. I couldn't say any better than that. All right, everybody. Thank you again for joining the show. Till tomorrow. We'll see you and stay safe.